Hey everyone, welcome back to Tallulah Talks. If you have been keeping an eye on my page, I have changed Saturday's haunting hour to Sunday's haunting hour just because I do a lot on a Saturday. I don't really do so much on a Sunday, and it gives me time to be able to upload. So it's Sunday's haunting hour today. And today we are going to be looking into the exorcism of a man called George Lukins, which happened in 1778. There's a lot of controversy around this. A lot of people think that he was faking it the whole time. A lot of people think that he had epilepsy because back in the 1700s you probably didn't really hear of anything like epilepsy, and you'll see where that comes in later in the video. So I've got my book of stories and we're just going to begin. So in relation to George Lukins, the story kind of begins with a man called Reverend Easterbrook, who was an Anglican vicar. He worked at the Temple Church in Bristol, and again this was in 1778, so this happened in the UK. On May 31st, a member of his parish, Sarah Baber, had paid a visit to the town of Yatton, which I don't think it was too far away from Bristol. And I think she stayed there for a few weeks. It was at this time that she allegedly saw a man with an unexplained condition. And he was said to be a tailor in his 40s. This man was who we know as George Lukins, and George would... It kind of just suddenly came on. It wasn't like it was throughout his whole life. It kind of just suddenly happened where he would have seizures daily, and they would only happen during specific or certain events that was happening. He was known to sing and scream very loudly, and many of the sounds that he was making were said to not resemble what would normally come out of a human. He would also shout curse words and very vile abuse at people, and he would actually also do this in a very aggressive manner. He had gone to various doctors to see if they could help him anyway or if they could cure him of this condition. However, they were not able to help him, and it was said that when he tried to explain to doctors what was happening, he had said it was like he had gone into a trance and that he didn't necessarily have control of his body. So at this time when Sarah had met George, she had been living in Yatton for a couple of years, and described an incident that changed her view of this man. So before any of this happened, because remember Lukins was now in his 40s, he was said to be religious, and he did go to church quite regularly. He was viewed as a good man by the locals in his community. However, this completely changed when his seizures began 18 years previous. Like I did say, there are kind of various people who think this was fake. There are varying conflicting accounts, so it makes it hard to kind of decide whether this was real or not. Like I said, he had visited many doctors, but unfortunately they just couldn't figure out what was wrong with him at the time. But you do have to remember this was in 1778. They probably didn't even know that epilepsy existed. And back then it was actually quite we are still religious, but it was more religious than scientific back then. So I think at this time everyone just went straight to demonic possession. It was recommended at this point that Lukins be observed, and he had an 18-month stay at the St George Hospital in London. His seizures continued and gossip began in his local community, and he was actually branded as either cursed or possessed. Lukins was just as confused by what was happening to him, because obviously it hadn't happened, it had all just kind of started. And the possession, which he believed he was, allegedly began when he was performing in a play at Christmas time within the church. He was making his way through the streets when he said that he felt like he was slapped by someone, and he said that he was slapped so hard that he actually fell unconscious at this point. Excuse me. Many actually called this a divine slap. I have never heard of that before. But they also attributed it to Lukins consuming a lot of alcohol. So I don't know if he was an alcoholic, but at that time it was said that he was consuming a lot of alcohol. Shortly after this, Lukins began then showing his odd behaviour, and this included seizures and making barking sounds. The most noticeable change was that he had a constant twitching of his right hand, and he began sharing the same thinking as everyone else in his community, that he was possessed by something. And he then went on to later claim that he was possessed by a total of 7 demons. He also claimed in order to get rid of these demons that he would need 7 clergymen to exorcise them. It was at this time that Sarah Baber had decided to go to her priest with all this, and he actually made arrangements to bring Lukins to Bristol to try and help this man. During this time, Lukins was said to be very violent, and he would also sing inverted hymns. So they would be religious, but then he would sing it in an opposite way, kind of worshipping anything demonic. He declared that he was also the devil, and it was also that he would speak in what was described as inhuman voices. And so now we're going to move on to the exorcism. So the exorcism actually took a total, I think it was around like 2 or 3 hours, and there was 14 clergymen involved with this exorcism. On June 13th, 1778, 14 clergymen along with Lukins met at the Temple Church at 11 a.m. At this time, they prayed for Lukins and they began singing hymns. It was at this point that Lukins became quite agitated, his face became quite distorted, and his body then started convulsing. His right hand and arm began to violently shake, and he then spoke what was said in a hoarse, inhuman voice. He told the men of the clergy that he was a fool for bringing in 14 clergymen, and he stated that he would never lose his hold on Lukins. So this was an inhuman spirit that they believed was speaking through Lukins. And the spirit basically said that he would instead torment Lukins for 1,000 times worse for even trying to expel these demons. It was at this point that Lukins began to sing in his usual manner of cursing and boasting of his power that he had over this man. He vowed eternal vengeance on Lukins, daring the clergymen to oppose him. It was then said that these entities spoke then in a female voice, so it's like several entities were coming through at different times. And this female entity expressed scorn and demanded to know why Lukins had brought in these clergymen. They swore by the devil that they would not give up hold on Lukins and cursed all who attempted to do so. The voice then began to sing in quite a female voice, and at the end of the song, the entities would sing of how they were going to torture Lukins. Another entity then took over, but the behaviour was pretty much the same, and they sang another song which was similar to that had been sung before, about how they were going to torment and torture Lukins because he had tried to get rid of these entities. The entity then stated, "I am the great devil," boasted of his power, and again sung of torture that they would vow to put on Lukins. It was at this point that 2 clergymen held him down, and Lukins would then laugh, and the laugh was described as horrid and hideous. So that kind of says to me that it wasn't like a normal laugh that me and you would do. It was more demonic or spiritual. Lukins then summoned all of the demons to appear, and while the clergymen prayed over Lukins, Lukins began to sing Te Deum in different voices and again changed the words to kind of pray to the devil. Some of the words went, "We praise thee, O devil, we acknowledge thee to be supreme. The song was so loud that it interrupted the prayer, and at this point the clergyman decided to sing some hymns. While praying again, the voice claiming to be the devil voiced defiance and vowed vengeance on everyone present. One clergyman commanded the demon in the name of Jehovah to state his name, because it is said when you look at anything to do with demonic activity or entities, it is believed that when you have their true name, you can then expel them from the body, because a name has power, and when you know that name, you have power over that entity. Lukins then replied, "I am the devil," and then the clergyman asked the spirit why he was tormenting Lukins, to which the spirit replied, "That I may show my power." And Lukins was said to be in agony at this, and a prayer was then said for deliverance. The clergyman endured with prayers in the name of Jesus, and they repeated this, but then Lucas continued to repeat devil. At this time, the clergyman commanded the spirits to leave Lukins' body, and a voice kind of returned saying, "Must I give up my power?" Which is kind of odd, because whenever, not that I've ever seen any real exorcisms, but you know when you kind of watch the movies and they just don't give up that easy. Like, I've read that exorcisms can go on for days, and whatever it is just refuses to give up the hold that they have on that person. This was followed by what was described as a dreadful howl, and another voice stated, our master has deceived us. Wherever shall we go?" So it's like the lead demon, or the so-called devil that was meant to be in Lukins, has kind of just left and abandoned the other spirits that were controlling Lukins. The clergyman then replied to this, "To hell thine own infernal, return no more to torment this man." Soon after this, more howling commenced, and then Lukins said in his own voice, "Blessed Jesus." He then knelt down and recited the Lord's Prayer and said a devout thanks to the clergyman. The exorcism took just over 2 hours and was said to be successful. According to the story, the possession was genuine, and Lukins returned to pretty much his normal life and to how he was before. However, there are people who believe this was fake, and obviously nowadays it is possible that he had epilepsy and maybe some other form of illness. Those who knew Lukins believed he had faked the entire ordeal. He was known to be very good in ventriloquism and mimicry, so this suggested that when, like during this possession, when all these voices came out, it was just Lukins putting on all these voices. He was also known to be a hypochondriac, and that kind of explains why doctors wouldn't be able to explain what was wrong with him, because if he was coming up with all these illnesses that he believed he had, but then there was no symptoms, or if there were symptoms but I was like the doctors hadn't seen those before, obviously they couldn't diagnose him with anything. There were theories put forward suggesting that, like I said, Lukins was epileptic. And Joseph Easterbrook actually wrote about the incident in 1788. And there's a quote from this: "An appeal to the public respecting George Lukins, exalcibate him from change of imposture." I'm not really sure what that means, but I think he believed what was happening to Lukins because he had maybe performed many exorcisms in his time. But again, I'm not entirely sure. Hannah Moore, another religious writer, wrote that devils are cast out by 2 ministers, pure human reason. So I think that's her saying that although the devils were apparently cast out, she believed that the man was faking this, and that is why it was pure human judgment. Lukins kind of faded into the background after the exorcism happened. He returned to his hometown, but attempted to move to Bristol many times, but for some reason the community just did not want him there. At this time he had no income, I think he maybe lost his job because of what had happened, and he relied on the parish and the church for financial support. In 1805, an article was published on his death, and unfortunately he lived out the rest of his life in poverty. We don't actually have any record of how Lukins passed away. It could have just been old age. But I'm kind of in two minds about whether this is real or not, because I do believe in spirits and entities and demons and things like that. I believe there are bad things in this world that want to harm us. However, it was also the 1700s, and back then we didn't have the knowledge on different illnesses that we do now. So it's entirely possible that he was a hypochondriac, that he had epilepsy, and maybe he had some form of disorder. But then on the other hand, I don't know why you would lie straight for 18 years about having these entities inside you. So I'm not sure how I feel about it. You guys can definitely let me know in the comments. But I feel like this kind of content, I am here every Sunday for Sunday's Haunting Hour, and then I am also here on Wednesdays for Killer Wednesdays, where I discuss the psychology of killers, which possibly explains their actions. So definitely hit that subscribe button, and I will see you on Wednesday.